Good morning. It is September 1st, and I call the Maple Plains City Council special meeting to order. Please stand and join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, having looked at the agenda, are there any additions or changes? No. All right, with that, looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Cahill, second by DeLuca. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Looking at old business, we're going to review quotes for Parkview Road and Maple Ridge Drive.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In your packets is the information that we received on quotes from Wednesday, August 30th. And as you can see, we, out of like 5 contractors that we initially sent the quotes to, and 4 that indicated, hey, could they have more time to submit it, we ended up getting a quote from 1 contractor. The contractor is Kruger Excavating Incorporated, and they're located in Prior Lake, Minnesota. The low base quote for the Parkview Road improvements was for $57,695. Alternate 1, which is the Maple Ridge Drive work, was for $33,150. And then alternate number 2, which was extending drain tile up to the homes on Parkview Road, was for $21,650. And we included our engineer's opinion of probable costs adjacent to those on both your kind of letter as well as on the quote tab, just to give you an idea of where we were anticipating costs might come out. And we were using prices from your recent projects that were bid, and we did increase them because it is a smaller quantity and a little bit different. But as you can see, the price, at least on the Parkview Road and alternate 2, came in a lot higher than our estimates. The work on alternate number 1, Maple Ridge Drive, came in, very close to our estimates. So in reviewing those, we compared like the actual prices, and it seems like the mobilization is one item that is a lot higher on Parkview Road. You can see the mobilization on Maple Ridge Drive was very similar to what we estimated, and I think some of that is, we out of the 3 contractors that are local that we anticipated, hey, a quote project, you don't have so far to move your equipment. I think the local contractor that I think this contractor from Prior Lake is probably working with on some of the street and curb work has a lower mobilization, but he's bringing in his equipment from farther away, and he put a higher price on that. Also on the drain tile work, and then the sod work. That was a little surprising because I know there's one contractor, that Scott's Turf. I think that one of the contractors that is local that said that he wasn't getting a price was from Scott's. I thought, okay, is this guy from Prior Lake, not getting a price from him either? But that's like $25 a square yard. That's a pretty good price on sod. And I know we don't have a whole lot of quantities, but usually sod, if you have some sitting there or you get some, it just seemed like a higher price. So yeah, in reviewing those, I know we talked at our last council meeting and work session about having a project in 2018. Is this something that we want to wait and tie in with our 2018 project? I know there's concerns with Park Lawn and the drain tile and the pumping on the road. We could talk with this contractor or others if there's other options. We're putting this behind the curb. I mean, in the boulevard area, was there something with dealing with the utilities that were causing the price to be $25 or $50 a linear feet? We could look at an option of coming from the park and just. So I think there's some options, but yeah, with one contractor giving a price, not having some prices from 2 or 3 of your local contractors, it's kind of hard to say how it would come out if one of those bid or not. And so that being said, can open it up for discussions and comments from the council.
I know the timing of this was due to safety 'cause we had that ice buildup last year. Was the ice buildup due to issues with the road, or was it due to the sump pump draining into the road? Do we know?
Yeah, I mean, my take on it, it was due to the sump pump drainage, and there was this, rain event that you had last Christmas that, and we've seen it in some other areas of the West Metro where we had like ice on, there's this one township road as well as another city road where there's just ice that they were dealing with all winter. And, it was a very wet 2016, so I think the groundwater was up. These homes were pumping more than what they've done in the past, and it sounded like from talking with one of the residents that Bobby and I met with, that he said, well, there was one other time back in I forget what.
The 80s.
Well, Bobby
Long time
wasn't
ago.
born.
Yeah. Before my time.
But it was a safety issue, and I think it was mainly due to the sumps. But that rain in December didn't help things much.
Well, and isn't it true, Dan, that we now have the road area sunk a little so that it's ponding in there too?
Right, there are those spots that we were going to be fixing.
I'm thinking particularly Parkview.
Correct. Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Can you clarify the third option, the $20,000 piece? Is that for the residents too?
Right. Right. It wouldn't been.
That would not be a city cost.
Correct. I mean, that was something that there's a few of the residents when we met with them that said, boy, we need this, we'd like this to be deeper at our property line. A typical resident, if it's 2-3 feet, you can maybe work out something, and with a little sweat labor, you can dig a trench 2-3 feet. But this one was proposed to be 6 feet deep. And so they said, hey, can you get a price, which is similar like when you're going to redo your driveway as a resident, you say, hey, let's get a few people together and maybe we can get a good price. Well, the city's getting this price on the drain tile and the right-of-way. Can we get a price associated with, digging a deeper line up to our home? And so that was the purpose of alternate 3.
One of the questions I had was when we did our listening session, I know there were some residents that were quite adamant that they hadn't lived here a long time, hadn't seen this problem since we redid Rainbow Park. Was there any way to look at, in paving the bike path, walking path in particular? Is there any way, did we look at any of those options? Did we find any way that we could help fix that as well?
Well, I know there was that discussion on Rainbow Park, and we had looked at that previously, before they had mentioned that. We had looked at the grading, the original grading plan that showed how do these lots drain. And it appears like from maybe over the years, there was a swale that went on it would be on the east side of some of the lots and kind of went to the north. And it didn't look like the bituminous trail itself was causing the issue. It seemed like there might have been people who have put some storage places in their backyard, and it just doesn't seem like that swale drains as well as it would have when it was originally graded. So I know there is that storm sewer that we put through Rainbow Park as part of the Oak and Rainbow project, and that's further north, and extending the pipe down there, and maybe serving these people from that way as a possible option. But when this was originally set up, it was thought that, hey, we don't have drain tile in the street on Park Lawn in this location. Having a drain tile that kind of helps your street subgrade, we just felt, well, you'd get 2 bangs for the buck with putting the tile on the street side. But as far as looking at the elevation of the trail and shooting property owners' yards, we didn't do that. But we did look at the original grading plan where it looked like, hey, some of this, as it tries to drain to the north on their backside of their yards, looks like it could have been affected by individual property owners' work over the years on their property.
What's the likelihood of any other quotes coming in this fall? Is this, or we're kind of to the point they're just not going to do it, you think? Or-
Well, there's some years where it's like people, have been busy, in the spring and the summer, and they're looking for some fall work. If you remember our project last year that was started on Bud, I mean, that contractor, he gave it was actually a little bit, if I remember right, a little bit, lower price because we could either start before Maple Plain Days or start after Maple Plain Days. And so I think from year to year, it varies on whether a contractor can do things. The fact that, our local contractors that do the water main break repairs didn't bid on it, and the one contractor another curb and gutter local contractor that I was working with, and I forget his name, but he had worked on, I think when we did the Hawk signal, he had did some underground storm work there, and I think the Craig Johnson's, him and his dad maybe work with that guy. He just said, nah, I'm kind of busy, and he knew he had to deal with some utilities behind the curb. It sounded like he just didn't feel like giving a price at this time. So I think it's just, unless I call each contractor up again and say, hey, would you have time? It's not that big of a project, so it's like a small thing. It wouldn't take long once you get your equipment there and you dig it in, but I think from year to year it can vary. Some years they're looking for work and they say, hey, this is something we can jump on and do, and the next year they're busy and they aren't. And from the fact that they didn't give prices, it just seems like, hey, we must be busy. These local ones, Widmer, Henning are the two that initially said last week, yeah, can we just have more time? So I don't know how. It would have been nice if they told us last week, no, we don't think we were going to give you a price, because then we could have discussed that with you on Monday night and discussed some other options.
In terms of safety, if we don't do Parkview this year, what does that look like?
Well, it's I can't predict the weather. I mean, that's really one of the main factors that go into this. So I think last year was a little bit of an anomaly in terms of getting 2.5 inches on Christmas Day. You'd like to think that's not going to happen again, but you don't know. I mean, that's the realistic component of it. I think you're going to experience some ice no matter what the moisture is on Parkview, just maybe not to the magnitude of last year. But again, that all varies depending on the weather.
Is there an option to provide another week or 10 days for bids? Reject this bid and take another 10 days?
Yeah, I think.
What's your assessment of whether that would produce more or a different bid?
I would, yeah. Let me think through that. And I didn't talk directly to the contractors, Henning and Widmer, so I mean, I could call them and ask them. It was a kind of just I can't on camera. After the meeting, I'll tell you what was going on between, getting these bids and today, but, so I wasn't able to call them, but it may be something they're willing to do. I wish they would have, we had the one contractor, the concrete contractor, that was trying to give a quote himself, and he just said, well, he was waiting for his sodding and excavating people, and they didn't give him the information to get the original bid. When he came to this week, he did call us on Tuesday and said, hey, I'm not going to be submitting a bid. My, the local guy who I work with on excavation just
But then I
isn't.
think the assessment here is, if one particular option could be to say no to this bid, go back to all the contractors, including this one, and say, try again. Do we have time this fall to do that? And do you think that would have a likelihood of getting more bids or a revised bid from this person?
Or would
And
the
that's
bid-
an assessment. on your
Yeah.
guys' part.
Well, I guess my
Move on.
assessment on getting a new bid from this contractor may not happen. I mean, he's already given his quote. Usually they don't, if it's not a bid type project, if it's just a quote project, I think his quote, he probably would say, hey, you can leave my quote in there, that's my quote. Getting another quote from the other contractors may happen, but the fact that they didn't give us a quote when we gave them extra time, I mean, I'm just not feeling as comfortable about that if they would have said that last week and said, hey, give us another 2 weeks, we'll give you a quote. They said, all three of them said, hey, one guy said, can you give us till Monday? The other guy said, can you give us till Wednesday? And so I don't have as much confidence that the locals are gonna give us a quote if they didn't do it after this amount of time.
I think the fact that, Dan sent out the plans
Yeah.
3 weeks in advance the first time. And that's a substantial amount of time right there. And not hearing that the result is so much schedule-based, but a variety of different reasons. It's very difficult to be able to determine if we would get more bids.
Well, and I get that. I was just trying to
Yep.
think of it from a pure option standpoint.
Sure.
One would be to do that, reject, reset the bids in hopes that you get more, or this guy decides, hey, apparently my number wasn't low enough, so I better rethink about that.
Sure.
Second option would be to accept it. Third option would be to push it into next spring and just dump this whole project as part of the bigger $1.5 million project. The fourth option, and this would be how far, is this number at a point where we don't need to have a bid, we could just go hire a contractor to do the work? And unless there's a fifth option, I think that's all those are our
Right, I mean.
decision points, aren't they?
Right, so what I kind of listed was, yeah, I mean, one option, as you said, is going with this contractor and getting the work done. Option two is delaying it and doing it with the next year's bigger project where, I mean, they're mobilizing for a bigger thing and they spread that over a lot of different areas. Three, I'm talking with them and seeing if we're gonna, some of these, if they'll give a price in another week or two is an option. I think the way I was talking before is that it just seems like it's not something at least our local contractors are willing to do. And what was the fourth option you mentioned, Mike? So I kind of see those three. Maybe a fourth option is that I talk about is, sometimes you got this price, do we negotiate or look at running things from, the park and extending? So maybe another option that's not putting it in the street area. But you're right, I think.
That also is not fixing the street, which is part
Right,
of this, though.
right.
My fourth option is the number of this project
I think it's a little high.
too high for your
I
comfort?
would not want to.
Okay.
I
No,
would
that's
not want to
fine.
go there. In general, in all sincerity, I look at this bid right here, and I look at for the Parkview project in general. We're over that $50,000 mark, which is usually my cap with the auditors.
Okay. That's
So
what I needed to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Couple of comments and a question. Comment number one would be if you resubmit for bids. Remember, this is all public record now, and it's not entirely fair to Mr. Kruger to allow the other four contractors to be able to look at this and find out where their competitor was, find out where your probable estimates are, and then bid accordingly. It's beneficial to the city. It's not entirely fair to the contractors. That's comment number one. Question number one would be, as I looked at these 5 contractors, no one contractor kind of does the whole package. I mean, one guy's a concrete guy, he's not an excavator. One guy's an excavator, he's not a concrete guy. So what you have is 5 contractors that have to request proposals from other contractors, and they'll general the project.
Right.
Is there any one contractor that you've worked with locally or in the state of Minnesota that kind of does the whole package, or are we dealing with smaller operations here that specialize in one entity of the project?
Well, Ryan Contracting, who did our Bud project, is a contractor that does, the utility work, the concrete work. It seems like finding one that does utility, concrete, and bituminous is not, even with the big contractors, it just seems like
Okay.
there's maybe one contractor out of like the Jordan area that I think, has a pit and has a utility crew. Maybe Northwest Asphalt does it too, but it seemed like, Ryan was our bigger contractor that just didn't even respond to the original quote. So there are some out there, but more than likely it just seems like this was geared to that smaller contractor, just some drain tile work, not someone that, and working with, you have some local contractors that do concrete work.
Right.
It seemed like a good fit for that, but there are a few, but not. It seems like even the bigger ones, one element they'll subcontract out, usually paving.
And I want to respond, John, to your first thing about the fairness of this. The engineering estimate was already public.
It was?
Sure, that's.
That's from the beginning.
I mean, it's
These, you're right.
His
Yeah.
estimate is already public.
Right, you're right.
The fact that these folks bid and we were to reject it and say, no, we want other ones, I'm not really concerned about the fairness to those folks.
Right.
It's sending a message
Right.
to the contractors that that number is not acceptable to this council.
Well, and then the other comment is my opinion is that this would be irresponsible to the city and the residents of Parkview as it stands right now. And I'll start with the second alternative, and that would be, he's obviously extremely high, and these are costs that we'd be saying, you gotta tie in. Oh, and by the way, they're twice as expensive as what our engineer stated that they probably should be. So we're saying, because we're late, because we only got one contractor to bid, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to pay twice as much. That's number two, number one.
Well, I just want to clarify real quick there, John. That's not necessarily the case. So, alternate 2 is an option that the residents brought up, but I know the residents have also reached out. They have the authority to use any other contractor
Oh,
that they
okay.
would like, so
Okay.
they're not bound by alternate 2.
Right, and they don't have to
That was more a courtesy.
right, physically kind, okay.
Yep.
But then the base quote, which is Parkview, I look at that as mobilization costs. It's like, hey, I'll do it, if you want me, but this is my price, take it or leave it. And then the fact that he is 4 times as expensive in his sod work tells me that he probably didn't have enough time to get someone to bid the sod, so he bid it extremely high, and he probably didn't get an accurate bid for his excavating, so he's twice as expensive on the 6-inch drain tile. So I mean, it would be irresponsible to do this with just one bid without a comparative. And I would lean more towards putting this into, I don't care if Public Works has to be out there every day this winter, every morning, to make sure that pump sumps aren't being discharged into the street, that there's no buildup. If they are, they're out there with a shovel, whatever they have to do to make sure that we don't replicate the safety issue. I agree that this needs to be fixed, but not in this fashion. And so I would lean more towards putting it into a bigger capital improvement project for 2018. Cross your fingers that we're not gonna replicate that perfect storm that we had last year.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that, I mean, we look at Parkview and evaluating it from last year. None of the homeowners were discharging illegally. So it was a very odd situation. All of them were discharging according to our ordinance,
It was pulled back.
and then some. It
Yeah.
was kind of a, like I said, it was an anomaly,
Right.
how much water we had.
And that brings me back to my comment from this summer on Maple Ridge. It's like, if you can't fix the discharge issue, you're just gonna have the problems again in the future. So you fix Maple Ridge, and they already said, I'm just gonna continue to pump. So the bigger issue is the discharge. Street is secondary.
Yeah, but the street, John, if the streets go, we end up with huge, massive $1 million projects that I'm not willing to say, I contributed to the cause of that. I think we also hurt, and this is my opinion, but I think we hurt ourselves to a contractor. If we've been thinking ahead, we put a small contract together here and then made the poor guy go through hoops. We'll give you an A, we'll give you a B, but you could bid it to have an A and a B, an A or a C, or an A, B, and C. I think at the end of the day, they were, this is too complicated for a $30,000-$40,000 project. That's my opinion. I think we should have put the whole project together and bid it as one, and I see no downside to rejecting this bid today, and then sending it out to people, which now you've just established the fact that you know where an unacceptable number is. If we do not get any bids in whatever time Dan and Bobby think is reasonable to still get this done this year, then it by definition would slide, John, to what you're talking about, which is the whole project gets dumped into the $1.5 million project. At that point, it's a blip in the $1.5 million.
Correct.
And I would support that theory
Well,
today.
sod's gonna come in
Mhm.
less expensive, mobilization is gonna be shared. I mean, the economies of scale, if it gets pushed off into a much bigger project, this might even come in less than your original engineer bid because they're the economies of scale. You mentioned that when we talked about Bud.
Mhm.
Maybe we should have tied Bud into another project so we had a bigger project to spread the costs amongst. So that's where I sit. I still insist that they be two different quotes. I don't necessarily know if the third quote was put in after the public meeting.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Mayor, maybe that's the first question that we have to ask. Is this one project or is it a project with an alternate? Because I don't think we have agreement on that.
I guess before I answer, I want to hear from engineer. Do you think that the multiple components of the bid, in your experience, does that deter people from bidding on a project this small, or is that not really a factor?
And I'm not a contractor, so I don't always get into their head.
Right.
So it's hard for me to say, it may affect one contractor that way and it may not affect the next contractor. So I think the bid items aren't, a lot, and so I think that helps that it maybe isn't as complicated, but this guy, yeah, it's hard to say without asking him. I know they if we repeat items, we have heard contractors say, well, you're repeating items, say like you have bituminous here on this street, and then you got bituminous on this street, and it's the same bid item. And it's that contractor that, remember the one we worked on Main and Rainbow, who he was kind of a feisty contractor in the first place. He kind of said, I don't know why you keep repeating your bid items all the time. Just put it in once. So that, I mean, if you're asking my experience, that's one contractor. Another contractor will say, well, that doesn't bother him. But that contractor, it did bother him having, unit prices here. That's the same unit price here. That's the same unit price here. He didn't like that. So, and it wasn't in Maple Plain. It was in another community that he said that.
If we were to agree to go out to bid again, would it make a difference if this was lumped as one?
To me or to a contractor?
To a contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's hard to say.
I think it's
It's hard to say. I think it comes down to preference, but I think ultimately what would help with that is that I think as council you got to look at it and say, do we want to do one or both these projects? And if you want to do both, lump them together and let's do one. It's probably a little bit simpler. Just because you're looking at one set of deals, you're not looking at multiple. You don't have to look for mobilization twice. And I mean, you look at Parkview drain tile. There's $10,000 mobilization and then $1,500 for Maple Ridge. Now that could be a bidding tactic too. Who knows why? That is what it is. But it's just
Well, we agreed at a earlier meeting when we were looking to go out for bids the second time.
Correct.
And we had quite a bit of discussion, and we determined that the only cost difference between the two would be that the mobilization would be shared if you did one project versus two.
Correct.
That was the discussion we had. Now, if you have 270 feet of something on one project and 80 feet on the other, but you have the same bid price, it's just a,
Correct.
it just put the same number in, it just, the multiplication is different.
No, but I think we're missing the point here. If I'm sitting as a contractor and I'm looking at piece A that has X units to it, and then I have to look at B that has X units to it, and I don't know if I'm gonna get the quantity of B because that's an alternate. There has to be a tendency here, and it's an intuitive feel that says, I am gonna have to probably up my unit cost for A because I don't know if I'm gonna get B. If I had the whole package together, I now have that concept in my head, and I'm gonna give you the best unit price I can come up with.
And the discussion I had, both in workshop and in business meeting, was that the Parkview project is a solution. We are fixing the water issue and the curb and gutter issue. We are solving a safety issue. I don't disagree with you, Mike, that Maple Ridge is in disrepair. It too is caused by water, not the degree that Parkview received last year. And until we figure out how to solve the water issue on Maple Ridge, I'm not entirely supportive of fixing Maple Ridge with this project. That's always been my position, why I wanted them separate. It's not a, in my world, it's not a package deal. And you need to solve the water issue on Maple Ridge the way we solved the water issue on, they need to tie into the drain tile. They need to,
But that falls back on us and staff on enforcing ordinances. Does it not?
Well,
On Maple Ridge?
Sounds like they
Because
are
they have the
in-
opportunity.
They are in compliance though, from the sounds. of
Not
it.
on Maple
They're
Ridge.
not.
They're not in
Oh,
compliance.
on
They
Maple
weren't in
Ridge, gotcha.
compliance even this
well,
week.
yeah, and we have been enforcing it. I can tell you, I visited a property owner last night. So it's continuing to educate the ordinance to the people there. I would say that there's multitude of different options. We can certainly do any of the number of options that we've gone over. We can combine the projects, we don't have to. But it's really up to council how we want to proceed at this point.
I'm inclined that we do go out for bid again, but we do it as one project, because I'd hate to go out the third time to the same people asking for bids, because then they know the ball's in their court. If we're coming back the third time asking for the same thing, who wouldn't raise your price? Because they know we're in need of their help. So I'm inclined to go back out for bid, making this one project.
Mayor, are you at the point where you'd entertain a motion? Because I'll present one.
you're
we
gonna
to get
back
the-
me into a corner on
To-
this
to-
now.
Well, so that we can start talking about this with realistic. I would move that we reject the bid that has been put in front of us, that we package the two pieces that have been formally identified as A and B into one package, do the alternate, which is for the residents, which is the optional piece, rebid it this fall with the hopes of obtaining an acceptable bid. In the event that there doesn't become an acceptable bid, or we can't agree on that, then it would be pushed into a project when we do the big project next spring.
And I would go so far as to
Hold
amend that
on,
to.
we need a second.
Oh, no,
Right.
I do not believe that's the case.
Yep, there's a
No,
motion.
there'd be a second.
So
and
So now I
then-
need a second.
And then
bef-
we'd have discussion.
And then
before
you
we
have
vote.
discussion. So I need a
And then that
second
would be the time
before
for that.
I can let you talk.
Yeah. I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion. Do I need to restate the motion?
Yeah, I would
30
do it
seconds.
one more time.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember DeLuca that we deny this bid, go back out for bid, combining the project as one. There's four stops.
With the alternate of the resident piece of it.
Sure.
Thank you.
That what was identified as option B.
Alternate two.
And I would like to amend that to say that we go out for bid, but we go out for Parkview only. And we utilize Maple Ridge in the 2018 project because that was not a safety issue. That's just a bad street issue. And so we tackle the safety issue first, and then you're taking Parkview, or excuse me, you're taking Maple Ridge, and you're putting it in front of streets that are 50 years older, that are.
John,
in-
can you, all due respect, can you just state your amendment? We can debate during discussion.
You're right. I would amend that we, if we're gonna go out for a rebid, that we go out strictly for Parkview. And we tackle Parkview this fall. And we address Maple Ridge as part of the 2018 CIP.
Okay, there's an amendment to just go out for Parkview and not Maple Ridge. Is there a second for the amendment? Hearing none, we will discuss the first motion on the table.
Well, then I would amend that we submit the same exact quote, the same exact bid, rather with two separate projects. I think to John's point, I'm not convinced either that Maple Ridge is a safety issue, but I would like to quote it again. And honestly, I think for a contractor, it'd be easier to get the same bid. If they already kind of started working on it, I think if we say, hey, we're still looking for the same thing, they can give us, they don't have to go back and recalculate numbers, I think. So I'd rather do two separate projects.
So.
Sorry, that was
No,
too much
that's all right.
discussion.
An amendment to the motion to go
Yeah.
out for bid with the project
The
as
same-
originally
yes,
submitted.
as originally
with-
submitted.
I'll
And-
second that.
Okay, there's a second on the amended motion. So, discussion.
So just a point of clarification.
It's too
So
different.
we're gonna vote on, after the discussion here, we're gonna vote first on the amendment to the motion, and then we'd actually vote on the whole motion again.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just making sure I'm tracking about what's gonna happen here, so. yeah.
And in our street plan, we did move Maple Ridge to 2017. I don't have it in front of me, but if my memory's
Mm.
serving me, did we not?
For the mill and overlay of Maple Ridge?
Well,
or-
on our street maintenance plan that you just gave us on Monday,
I don't think it's 2017. I think it's a little bit further back.
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
I had asked the question whether that street maintenance plan was based on the assumption that the Parkview and Maple Ridge were done in 2017, and the answer I got was yes.
That's what I thought.
So I'm kind of torn on this, getting back to the discussion bit, because I totally understand your guys' point of view with it and how you'd classify, you know, immediate safety, future concerns with road degradation, degrading, and, but I'm at the point now where I look at the previous history of where we've been as a city, where we kick the can down the road to save $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 at a time, and you're just putting off projects, we've got excavators there. We got people that can do this. I'm just to the point, we're delaying costs for a year, you know. Let's just get it done. And I just want to see stuff get done. We're going to see heavy equipment there. We certainly could do it in two different projects, and we might be out $2,000 in mobilization or whatever we kind of thought that might be, but I'm tired of delaying stuff, and I think we're ambitious in our plans for next year as well. If we can get this done this fall, that just leaves that much more to do next year and in our 2018 CIP. So I totally get the theory of it, but I'm to the point where I'm kind of exhausted of debating this and that. I just want to get stuff done if they're here. So that's why I'm supporting the just lump them together. If that helps us expedite this and get it done, you know, we'll move on. So that's just my thoughts with it.
Was your
but-
motion to bid it both ways?
To
Lump
bid it
together
exactly the same.
and-
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly
Mike's?
the same as
No,
we
no,
have.
Just,
No,
just, oh.
Just
Yeah.
as was.
And
Just
my
replicate it,
point
yeah.
was more, it was less about keeping them separate so we could do them separately, and more that I think we'll get more bids if we send out the same exact
Same.
bid. They've looked at
Gotcha.
it, they've seen it, we might just get a lower one from this guy.
Yeah.
You know, because I would, if that does not pass, I would support going out for the one, because you're right, at this point, I don't know that it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
But I think we will get more bids or lower bid if we
Sure.
just submit the same thing.
And I hear what you're saying with the concern about Maple Ridge, but that ultimately falls back on us and enforcement and education, so that's a whole nother
Well, then.
piece and discussion.
Then why isn't Parkview education and enforcement? Is it
Because they've
Park-
already agreed and they don't have the opportunity right now.
The education and enforcement is just to follow the ordinance, so it's to keep the sub pump hoses back, not right into the curb. And that's not an issue on Parkview. Parkview is discharging perfectly legal. Even with all
And
the
they
ice
are.
last year, it was perfectly legal. I made a run through Maple Ridge last night. I had one resident I talked to that had a hose right there on the curb. It's part of it is systemic, multiple years and years of failure to comply. I think the message is getting out there, but after 10, 15 years of non-compliance, then it becomes an issue because then the road does erode away there. So that's where we're at there in terms of education and compliance.
Any further discussion? Right. So with that, we have an amended motion on the table to go back out for bid as is, and then come back and look at that. All in favor of going back out, denying the Kruger bid, going back out for bid, as is?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I said aye, yeah.
Okay.
Very
For
quietly,
opposed?
yeah, for opposed, yeah.
All right, so we have 3 for and 2 against, so the motion carries.
Pardon me?
No, it's denied.
Did you vote
I
for?
voted for.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear
Going
that.
back out
Oh,
for bid.
Gotcha.
The same way?
The same way, okay.
So then it is 3-2.
No visitors?
Well, Madam Mayor, now you have to go back to the motion as amended. You vote on an amendment, then you go back to the motion that was just amended, and you have to vote on that.
Correct.
Right.
So did
I
I
thought we
state it
just
wrong?
I thought we
Oh.
just voted on the amended.
You did, you voted on
Correct.
the
Oh, okay.
amendment.
Yeah, now we have to
as
vote on the
amended.
actual motion.
Now you gotta go
yeah.
back
Back
to
to
the
the
motion.
actual
Yeah,
motion.
yeah,
Alright.
yeah.
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
and we will go back to the original motion stated by Councilmember DeLuca. Do you have that all written down?
Nick?
Yeah, the motion was to combine Parkview and Maple Ridge Drive into one bid with the alternate 2 as a option B bid for the residents, and that's the drain tile
That's the
portion
drain
of it.
tile house.
To get those bids and then reconvene and then go from there. If the bid submitted at that time is not to the council's liking, then to wrap this project into the 2018 larger street reconstruction project.
But point of clarification, the original motion was to combine the 2, have the alternate with B, and then if we didn't get a bid, to package those for next year.
No.
The amendment that was just passed changed that, a piece of that,
Correct.
to, we're gonna go out for bid this fall as is.
Correct.
It would not therefore change the motion as I would see it on the table, would be, you're gonna go out with these items as it was, and if we didn't get acceptable bids, it would be packaged together for next year in one.
Yes.
That's
Correct.
how it's reading right now.
Correct.
Yes.
Complicated, but I think I'm tracking that.
Yes.
Yes.
You approved the amendment, but not the actual motion.
Right.
Yep. So we would need to vote on the motion.
And the motion has to carry in order for the amendment to carry, correct?
No, the
No.
motion has
Oh,
to be
denied.
denied in order for the
No.
amended.
The motion as amended
Real-
is now what's on the table.
Mhm.
So then what you just stated, it,
Is the
Is
motion.
the motion.
That's on the table.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He motioned A, she motioned B. We first voted, are we gonna go for B? B was passed
It changed.
As B, yeah.
It changed some of the conditions of the motion
Yeah,
now.
now we're gonna actually all agree that B passes, like, or A becomes B and now passes.
Okay, a point of parliamentary procedure here. When a motion is amended, the motion still has to be voted on.
Correct.
Correct.
The amendment changed some of the terms in this particular case of the motion. The motion that is sitting in front of the group right now would say, we are bidding this. It technically would say we're bidding it as two pieces plus the resident chunk. And if we don't get it, it will all be lumped together in one, A and B would be lumped together next year into the big project. That would be the essence of the motion that we now are debating.
Yes.
Because you changed a couple of the conditions.
I did.
Essentially pulled them apart for this year so that they're separate.
So in order to make the amended motion legal or pass, we also have to pass the original
original one.
motion.
Which has changed from the amended,
Got it.
because the amended passed and changed the
Okay.
motion.
Does that make sense?
I believe so.
Okay. Is everyone clear on what we're voting for? All right.
More coffee.
You need more coffee? All right. So we are voting on the amended motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, 4-1.
She said aye.
Thank you. Good, complicated discussion. Nice and early in parliamentary 101.
And I ran out of coffee.
And you're out of coffee.
Back in school now.
Wow. No visitors. We had no other business. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Moved by
Second.
Second,
DeLuca.
oh.
All right, the meeting is adjourned.
I don't get to amend the motion to adjourn.
Have a safe drive.
Thank you.
Have a good